Imran Khan, Swan Energy.
And today it looks like Imran will be flying solo. No Brandon Davis of Swan Energy or Jeremy Pate with Swan Energy. So just the entrepreneur. Well, you guys are all entrepreneurs, but I've actually been to your restaurant, so easy for me to say that. But how you doing today there, Mr. Imran Khan?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much, Jason, for asking. Just been a fun week. These guys are out busy. We got a lot of stuff going on, and I just wanted to make sure that we made time for this along with everything else we've got. So
How
that's
is
why you
it?
only get one.
By the way, how is it down in Houston? You know, a lot of the activity going on is in the Permian. They got 100 some rigs down there, but Houston is where a lot of the main oil companies and et cetera are located. A lot of the service companies, of course, are in Midland. But how's the activity down there? Because we're going to talk about how the next several years are going to be primed for small to mid-size oil companies. So, how's the activity in Houston?
Well, I can actually probably tell you a little bit about both. This week, I was up in the Permian in the Big Spring specifically area, and it was a different part of Texas. So it was nice to be able to see what all goes on in those areas. In Houston, I'll kind of touch on that first. Things are moving forward just like they were before. Obviously COVID has played a little bit of a role in how things are structuring up right now. But for the most part, we've been staying very busy, taking whatever opportunities we can in a down market, at least from an oil and gas standpoint, to be able to get in at the right prices and things. In general, we've got folks wearing masks, doing their day-to-day type of activities. I know our governor mentioned that he is not looking to lock down Texas, which is great to hear. I think that that's probably the right move. I think that a lot of that probably is based on the fact that a lot of these vaccinations and different items that are being developed are a lot further along than they were earlier in the year. So from an outbreak standpoint, I think that's a good thing to be able to see that there's some remedy there. But yeah, overall in Houston, things are going well.
You mentioned you were in Big Spring out there in the Permian Basin. Boy, that's just a stone's throw away from Midland and Odessa. And there is some activity in the Big Spring area. So I'm glad to hear that we're going to get a little bit of an update from there. What did your eyeballs see?
It was interesting. Obviously we were on some work that we were doing on some assets acquisitions that we were looking into, and the telling sign to me was going out to eat up there. Right, we looked at some wells. Did some due diligence, and we took a break in between around probably about 11:30, and we went to one of the small restaurants. Everything up there for the most part is all local, which is honestly for me it's great to be able to see that. For considering the fact that we've got so much going on from a small business perspective. It was a steak and seafood place, and I wish I could give them a shout out, but I forget the exact name. But we walked in, and we were probably there was only one other group that was there, and then I was like, man, maybe it's not as busy as I thought it was, and then probably within 10 minutes of us sitting there, the whole place just packed up. So it was great to be able to see that people were coming out doing things. I think from an activity standpoint, it was good to be able to see the different people that are there. Overall, from what I understood from Jeremy, who'd been out there about a year prior, it was definitely lower activity than back then. But just seeing the fact that folks are out there, they're out there, doing work. I had a gentleman, approach me. He obviously realized that I wasn't a local guy, and we started talking. He owned a catering company up there. I believe the name was Coyote Catering, and he handed me his card, and he told me, hey, just want to give you my card and let you know that we do catering for your guys. If you guys have any jobs or anything going on, we'll come out to you and do whatever we need to do. So it was nice to be able to see that, from a small business perspective, people were very, very friendly, very nice, and, out there trying to promote their businesses and do the work that they need to do to be able to get back to where we need to be from a business standpoint.
Switching gears, talking a little bit about mining money, about investing in the marketplace, and just kind of some discussions along there. I wanted to bring up an article that Yahoo Finance put out actually just today. And it's something that you and I have talked about and Brandon Davis has talked about. When it comes to the next year, the next couple years, when it comes to oil and gas, and keep in mind, strength in numbers and that sort of thing is going to be critical going into this, whether it's through a network or whether it's through investing in numbers or whether just some sort of support system that you can have, because what's happening here is there is a transition. Now, whether it's the energy transition that's happening that Joe Biden is talking about, or whether it's the transition that was happening before COVID, which is the oil and gas industry is becoming a little more automated, it's becoming a little bit more educated, and so there is a shift. There's a paradigm shift happening in a lot of different ways, which means the money's shifting. Doesn't mean it's going away, it just means it's shifting a little bit. This article is talking about how the next couple of years are going to be fantastic, it says in the headline, fantastic for small oil companies. And I don't know how you guys classify yourself at Swan Energy, but I would call you small to mid-size. I don't think you're as big as Exxon. Maybe you are. Maybe there's something you're not telling me, but generally the big ones are Shell, BP, Exxon, and maybe even a couple others, I guess.
We strive to be as large as they are, but yeah, you got that right. We're definitely we're small mom and pop at the end of the day. In the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, and so I look at that as, just like the big companies, the small companies can thrive too, but there's ebbs and flows in the marketplace. And right now is a good ebb for the flow for small business, because it's the nimble and the quick ones that are going to be able to do things. The guys that can go check out something in Big Sprig, well, no one else can. I'm sorry, Big Spring. I think I said Sprig. Big Spring, I was thinking about the restaurants again where you put a sprig of parsley, because I'm going to ask you about Parsley Energy in a minute too. So my mind is all messed up here on a Friday. There's actually some method to this madness, but where I'm going with this is that the nimble, the quick, the money's out there, but the big corporations, hey, they're still trying to figure out their COVID policies and their ESG policies and whether they can wear masks on Tuesdays and have casual Friday. They're not going out in site exploration. They're not going out and testing soil and doing those types of things. So that's an example of why a small to a mid-sized company right now is a great place to invest your money. So I wanted to hand that baton off to you to talk a little bit about what you guys do and how you guys are looking at different investments to just kind of continue the conversation with what you were just doing out in the Permian.
Yeah, definitely. I think that really tells a good story right there. In terms of from a smaller size company, we're definitely a lot more mobile and agile, and definitely out there doing what we can to be able to pick up different assets at the right price. When oil is $40, is definitely a time to be able to get in and pick up different assets based on those values. I think a lot of the larger companies, they're a great place to be able to invest also. Their stocks are very low, but at the end of the day, their future is really dependent on a lot of the administration, as is ours, but more from a standpoint of where they're going to be going from a regulation standpoint. I think a lot of the government regulations favor much of the small businesses to be able to get them to become bigger. From that standpoint, you can see a lot of the different things that BP has out there in the media with respect to going more green and reducing their carbon footprint. I think that's an overall goal of everyone's. Long-term wise, we all want to be more energy efficient at the end of the day. But it really does create opportunity for the smaller guy, the independent oil and gas companies, because if these large guys are moving into other spaces and exploring those areas, it's not that energy is not going to be produced. We're not going to stop producing oil and gas. We're just going to be able to have opportunities to be able to go in and pick up these different assets, be able to develop the actual wells that are out there that we can. A lot of times there's a lot more investment in developing new wells versus improving current wells. So maybe from a new well standpoint, oil prices will have to go up to be able to afford that act from smaller business standpoint. But it just depends on where we go with the legislations, right? I think if oil is at its bottom right now, I feel that fairly strongly. I think it's been in the low $40 range for some time now. And, I think the stability there is very important because that really allows us to be able to confidently buy at these prices. And, when we're buying things at these prices, we're looking to be able to ensure that there's enough room for us to be able to bring in partners and to be able to do the workovers and to be able to bring up the actual production at these specific current numbers. If it goes up to $50, $60, $70 one day, I don't know if it'll go back up to the heydays of $100, but it may not be. It can definitely become $60, $70, I feel. And we were there not too long ago. So if that happens, then there would be a nice big push in the right direction for these companies, and the profitability would be a lot higher for the small independent guys that are out there.
Another advantage that a small independent person has, the smaller oil companies, the small to mid-size, if you will, is a lot of the bigger guys, they're being pressured into the ESG movement. You mentioned some of the climate activism, how it's impacting, the bigger companies' decision making, and that is true. They're having to either do new research and development with unproven profits, or they're having to, and allocate resources where there historically has never been a return. Whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, that's not what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is that they've had to shift resources over to areas where traditionally they had profits, and they haven't had a chance to create new profit centers yet. And when they can't do that, well, they're going to have a little bit of some growing pains. And they're big corporations. They move very slow. They're like the Titanic, going through the ocean. The small guys, this is where the quick and nimble ones are able to do some different areas and make some money and go like that. I do not see, whether it's Germany or California or any country that has gone green, that has shown that it's become not only profitable, but energy efficient yet. So I think that this green transition is going to go a little bit longer than people anticipate. I'd like to know just, this is all speculation and this is all just opinion based, but I'm just looking at, Germany, which is supposed to be the poster child of the green revolution. They had to fire up the coal plants last year, and they do a lot of biomassing, of burning of trees. So they have problems. Their heat bill has gone up 4 times to what it was when it originally started. Similar things have happened in California. California has got blackouts. They've got wildfires because of this, where energy companies have had to cut back on tree trimming and all kinds of different things. So, point is that I think there's going to be more growing pains, which is going to be a little bit more of a safer bet for the small to mid-sized companies. So, anyway, your thought on just some of that speculative, ramifications, I guess.
It's interesting. You bring up some really good points there. Jason, I was at a dinner last night, and prior to the dinner, Heidi Cruz, who works for Goldman Sachs, spoke a little bit about just the economy, how things are going to be moving forward, just a lot about what to expect if the Biden administration does end up coming in some of the details around the clean energy plan. It was interesting to be able to hear these different ideas, a lot of which, will be impacting these larger companies. One of the things that I want to kind of paint the picture around is the year was 1985. The movie was Back to the Future, right? And the year that they went to in the future, it was 2020, right? In 2020, they had the idea of cars flying. And I don't know, I don't see too many cars flying yet. So I think the approach, with a lot of the different alternative energies, the different ways that these different companies larger companies that are out there, they're spending their cash flow, the BPs, the Shells, the Chevrons, rightfully so, right? They're obtaining their cash flow from oil and gas, and they're going into innovative different areas. And it's great to be able to have that luxury for the big guys to be able to go in and understand and develop new technology, right? They've got budgets to be able to do that. And it's great to be able to have a company that they buy out and, they take to the next level because they have the capabilities and the means to. But it really has a lot to do with the funding of those types of technologies, right? There's a lot of talk of vehicles all going into EVs. And somebody there asked me about that, and I gave them that example. I'm like, look, the whole idea of EVs coming in and, no more cars that are hydrocarbon based by 2035. I mean, honestly, it's 14 years from now. And if you think about, in 14 years to get rid of all the current vehicles that we've got, first of all, who pays for all that, right? We've got Americans that are out there that, are living paycheck to paycheck. And it sounds great, right? Like, a lot of the affluent people out there, they own Teslas, and it's great to be able to have that. But, I can pretty much guess that for most of those folks, Tesla is probably not their only vehicle. So it's a luxury from that standpoint also to be able to have these new technologies and using these new technologies. So, I'm going on, but my point is, the development of all these different types of new energies is very, very important. Now, will it happen quick enough? Will we have solar power that is so amazing that, it puts off oil and gas? Will we have wind farms that are powerful enough to where we don't need oil and gas anymore? If you think about the development that's going on in India, China, Africa, it really begs the question that, I would believe that oil and gas is going to be staying the way it is. And maybe these big companies that are out there that are, transitioning from just being oil and gas companies to becoming energy companies, maybe they take on these innovations and develop some of those areas further. Obviously time will tell. But I'm not going to hold my breath. 1985 to 2020, we don't have flying cars yet. To be all on electric in the next 15 years or 14 years, I don't know if that's possible, but I really do hope and wish that we can get to a point where, we're more, we have more types of energy available to us to use.
Have you ever heard them say when you start a technology course in college, by the time you graduate, that technology is obsolete?
It's done.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
that's when I was a freshman, they were teaching us Lotus. And by the time I graduated, 4 years later, Lotus wasn't
Lotus
even around.
Notes, I remember that.
Yeah, it wasn't even around, right?
Lotus Notes and Lotus 123. I remember those tools back in the day.
Exactly. And so I do think a lot of policymakers should probably take that into consideration, because a lot of times when they're doing a 5 to a 10-year subsidy tied to some of these renewable packages or whatever the case is, that's holding back something like a hydrogen. I honestly, I don't think the electric cars are going to be around long enough, because I think they'll probably make some advancements on hydrogen, because they've been trying to do that for 20 years. And it doesn't get really any government subsidy money, because otherwise it might get somewhere. So basically you got all these crazy capitalists working on hydrogen, but they're doing pretty good. And I keep hearing advancements. And the reason I know a lot about this hydrogen movement is because Fargo, where I live, is a testing place for a lot of different things. They used to say play it in Peoria. Well, we had vanilla Coke before everybody. We had 75-cent USA Today, while the rest of the country had 50-cent USA Today. We're a test market for a couple of reasons. One, it's a Midwest town, but the second one is because I-29 and I-94 cross over and they intersect each other. So we've got the two interstates that cross over, and in the Midwest, that's very valuable. So we have electric charging stations, LNG stations. They talk about the hydrogen stations. Anything to do with transportation, Fargo's always one of the ones that's going to get some new technology. So I did want to mention that about the hydrogen vehicles, just to put that out there and plant the seeds in people's mind.
That's actually a really good point. With the hydrogen vehicles standpoint, BMW worked very closely with a couple of different oil and gas related companies to develop their hydrogen 7 series. And just to let you know, that 7 series is about 4 models behind the current model. And what I mean by that is it was back in, I think, I want to say 2010 or so. It's been 10 years and I still don't see hydrogen vehicles out there, right? I think to your point earlier, you talked about lawmakers, and lawmakers like to sell things that are sexy, right? It's easy to sell something that has a good story to it, right? I think that's really what it, and most lawmakers are that way, right? I'm not saying everyone is, but it's that idea that gets you the funding in the electric world or in the EV space, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, you bring a really good point with respect to hydrogen. It's all about markets and markets taking on the new changes, right? It's not just the technology being developed, but also, from a market standpoint, can people actually take that on? And what usually happens in that space is the chicken and the egg, right?
Right, and maybe it's not hydrogen, maybe it's cold fusion, maybe it's whatever it is. The point is that the going back to that, the lawmakers trying to put 5, 10, 20 years on these subsidies when the technologies are changing so fast. All you got to do is go to the university level to look at the majors and the different technologies and softwares and the methodologies that they do. On a bigger picture, if you want to take a step back from the 5,000-foot view, the other problem that these energy companies are having, in my opinion, and you're a smaller company, so you might understand this on the microscope level, and therefore it's easy to fix, which is when you take a look at oil and gas, you think of Houston. And Houston is all about central planning. The old America is all about central planning. You want to have, like you mentioned, the flying cars. You think of the utopian Blade Runner, whatever it might be. That it's this central planned utopian that we all live in. Well, then you go to Silicon Valley, and it's nothing like that. It's just a bunch of hodgepodge, weird stuff that a bunch of guys with money podged over here had, and everything else, and there's really no central planning behind it. So I look at the way that the oil and gas industry's Houston mentality of central planning is now trying to coexist with the Silicon Valley just nonsense. That's what is kind of happening. And because it's not returning a profit right away, and the Silicon Valley method, lose money for 5 years till you get bought out by a billionaire, I don't know if that's going to work in oil and gas. I guess I don't know, but maybe it will. We'll talk about Parsley Energy in a second. But
you'll see a lot of folks going out of business and bankruptcies happening, right? I think.
Well, totally.
You're right. A lot of times I think about what you just said. Like these companies come up with these ideas and they're failures, and someone comes out and throws $1 billion or whatever into it. Well, yeah, of course. When you throw a large number like that, you just kind of maybe you eventually find the success, or you continuously fund the failure, right? And it really comes right back to what we were talking about with hydrogen earlier, right? It just really make the difference is some things are positive and that they're going to succeed, and other technologies are not.
This next question, I actually wish Brandon was here for this next question, because I'd love to hear his opinion on this. So Matt Gallagher, CEO of Parsley Energy. He was used. We used him as an example several times throughout this program because when Texas was talking about stepping in and controlling production, do you remember that last fall or last spring?
Yeah.
That was controversial. And Mike Summers from API, like before they even suggested that, before the end of the sentence, he came out, knee-jerk reaction. Absolutely not. Oil and gas, no subsidies, this and that. Well, then Matt Gallagher for Parsley came out a week later on CNBC and said, maybe we should look at having that happen. Maybe the government should do that. Well, he's pretty tight and pretty close with a lot of the people who are making the decisions. Well, then they, a few months later, last week, they get bought out. They had debt, significant debt. So he was essentially becoming not only a CEO but a lobbyist for that controlled production.
That's what he was doing, was he was telling a story with that, right?
Totally.
Basically, you know what I mean? If you look at what his view was versus, what the government's view was, and then him coming out and saying that, and now it being sold off, it's a total, it happens, right? I mean, it's not easy to be able to survive in these types of tough times. But
that's where I see where a lot of people get a little bit upset about the government coming in and stepping in and that sort of thing, because if you have access to a lot of these different companies and that sort of, politicians and lawmakers, that's where all of a sudden you get that subsidy money while the other guys are still hustling and, hemorrhaging out at the end of the day. And that's why we go back to the safety in numbers and strength in numbers and that sort of thing. I just thought that was interesting that he was lobbying for the government intervention because they were going to get it. And then, a few months later, they get bought out by, who bought him out again? It was, okay. It'll come to me here. Yeah. Sorry. Jadestone, was it? Was that the name? Jadestone?
It's possible.
Anyway, well, that's not important. So let's talk about Swan Energy, what you guys have going here and stuff. But going back to, the bigger guys aren't necessarily the safe bet right now when it comes to investing. It is the smaller companies, the mid-sized companies. So let's talk about what you guys have going on, what you're investing in. You're just out in Big Spring taking a look at some Permian properties. Natural gas, I know you guys are always looking at that as well, but talk to me about the investment side and what people can do to come and invest with you guys.
Yeah, definitely. So we've got a lot of things going on. We've got a lot of different projects right now. We're setting up for a frac next week. For some of our partners that have invested with us. So we've got a lot of different things going on. The best way to be able to get in touch with us and discuss some of the different investment opportunities from a partnership standpoint is to reach out at www.swanenergyinc.com. Again, swanenergyinc.com. If you'd like to reach me directly, you can too. It's Imran at swanenergyinc.com. It's IMRAN at swanenergyinc.com. I'd love to be able to hear from people. I know you've forwarded some different messages over to me in the past, Jason, and it's always great to be able to see and understand different viewpoints and hear from our listeners always.